I have two questions. My name is Chuck Bosman. I'm from Interlaken. I'm a former teacher also, former administrator also. One question deals with the makeup of the board that will come out of this if we merge. Most boards are an odd number. I didn't say they were odd people, I just said an odd number. And from looking at page 26, it shows that more people vote in South Seneca than in Romulus on the general rule. Is there any contingency to have districts or so that one community doesn't overpower the other one? The second question is, many of the kids in Ovid, particularly in elementary school, actually live closer to Romulus than they do to South Seneca. It is 4 miles to Romulus and 7, 8 miles to Interlaken. Are down the road these people going to be allowed to make their choice on what elementary school they're going to go to? And how will that affect the capacity of those schools down the road when you indicated that Romulus would be tight? I mean, if I had a kid that's in kindergarten and I lived closer to Romulus, I might want him to go to Romulus for this 5 years. How is that going to affect overall?
Let me hit the question on the board members to begin with, if I could. When a merged district is created, there are no such things as election districts. Everyone who runs for the Board of Education runs in the single district, the single merged school districts, single merged school district. So no, there is no legal option for creating a certain number of seats from one locale versus another. Having said that, should this process move forward, the boards will decide, I believe on December 10th, whether or not they are going to put this question up for a public vote. Following that, there will be a public referendum in each of the 2 communities about whether or not these districts should merge, and that first vote in the communities is an advisory vote only. It's not final and binding. If that passes in both communities, there will be a final vote about whether or not these districts should merge. And at that point, as part of that final vote, not only will the communities be answering the question, should these districts merge, they will also be answering the question, should there be 5 members on the new board, 7 members on the new board, or 9 members on the new board? And should the terms of office for these people be 3 years or 4 years or 5 years? That's where the structure comes from in terms of seats. That's where that decision is made. So let me go back to the first part. Is there a legal way to do this? Probably not that I'm aware of. I will tell you, however, in every situation that I have seen where 2 districts have merged, there comes a point in a meeting of both communities where someone stands up and says, this is a very big job we're about to undertake. We need to pull these communities together. We need to pull these school districts together. Let's have some agreement that, all right, if we're going to have 7 board members, our community will run 4 people, your community runs 3 people, and that's how we're going to populate the first board. Is that legally required? No, it's not, but I've seen probably 4 or 5 of these where that's exactly what's happened. Someone has stood up and said, it's a lot of work that has to go into this. Let's not have a major catastrophe with the board election. Let's ensure that there's representation from both of the previous school districts.
The second question you asked was, would a future Board of Education consider, in terms of elementary attendance areas, allowing parents to choose which school, elementary school they'd like their child to go to if they were closer to one but were in an attendance area of another? Boards of education that have multiple school sites frequently have to grapple with this issue of attendance areas. Some boards have established policies that do give parents on certain locations, because sometimes they're difficult transportation spots for pickup for young people, and for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they grandfather them in. So the board can make that determination, but it's it's not unusual that when you have multiple elementaries, as we're recommending here, that somewheres down the line, there may have to be some redistricting of those attendance areas to ensure that the class sizes in the elementaries remain somewhat in line with each other. And districts that have multiple sites, we just did one for a district about a year ago that redrew their elementary attendance areas for that exact reason as well as something else. So that's a policy the board's going to have to, the new board will have to deal with, and I assume they will if parents come forward and say, gee, we live closer to, this school, but we're supposed to go over here, and the board will grapple with that issue. But that will be under the province of the new board.
My name's Larry Alley. I'm from South Seneca. I had a couple of questions. Going back to finding 29 when you talked about staffing efficiencies and BOCES impacts, because you made the assumption that those would be full-time people rather than BOCES. I didn't understand why it couldn't be left structured the way it is so you have a win-win situation. And I also have a second question after that, and these are to the consultants.
Yes, we really think that many of those positions currently are like the business positions, for example, has a full-time business manager in South Seneca and a 4/10 position in Romulus. So together there are 1.4 positions to head up the business offices. We don't think there's a need for 1.4 people. We understand the person's going to be busy, but we don't think there's a need for 1.4. We think there's just the need for one full-time person. So that's a reduction in 0.4. The only way that school districts can generate that BOCES aid is to share services with other school districts, to share personnel. So there's no way that a district can have a full-time employee and still get that extra money from BOCES. It's just prohibited.
There's no examples of fractions of people in both districts such you can still capitalize on that. I guess you guys looked at that and the answer is no.
I was a BOCES superintendent for 18 years. And we tried a lot of different things, but we never figured out a way to get aid on full-time employees, no.
My second question is, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you've portrayed this as a very positive merger. I did not hear anything financially or more importantly qualitatively from an education standpoint that was a downside to the merger. So is there any disadvantages, any qualitative? I didn't see any financial quantitative disadvantages, and you went through a lot of numbers. Any qualitative or any other disadvantages that you would talk about?
As Bill mentioned earlier, there clearly are pluses and minuses. What we, I think, portrayed in our presentation is that from a financial standpoint, there are clearly pluses to this merger. And hopefully from a programmatic standpoint, what the district could offer the students, both from a regular curricular standpoint as well as an extracurricular standpoint, we believe there's great potential for that to be a very positive change as well. Having said that, there are some negatives in this. There is not going to be probably a Romulus school district anymore. There is probably not going to be yellow and black Falcons anymore. There are going to be, there's not going to be, if our recommendations come together, there's not going to be a middle school in South Seneca anymore. There's not going to be a high school in Romulus anymore. Students who live in the northern part of Romulus, who are high school students, are going to have a longer bus ride because they'll be coming from the northern part of Romulus down to South Seneca for high school. Middle school students who live in the southern part of South Seneca are going to have a longer bus ride because they're going to be bused to Romulus. So there clearly are pluses and minuses. While Bill mentioned, this doesn't solve the problems forever. So I would say that while there are limitations to the financial benefit, we believe clearly there are financial benefits. We believe clearly there are programmatic benefits. We also believe that from the perspective of identification with the school being the center of these communities, additional transportation for some people, the loss of identity of a school district, the colors and a mascot that a community identifies with its district, all of those things are minuses. And we think in the end, that's what people, when Bill said there are pluses and minuses, there are pros and cons, we believe that that's what people are going to weigh when they vote on this.
And I would just add to what Alan just said that, I mean, if you think about it logically, if the district gets this extra revenue in that it wouldn't get if you remain as separate districts, of course there's going to be an opportunity to use that to the educational advantage to some degree for students. And that's why we never recommend take all the money and just reduce taxes. You know, I mean, there's certainly taxpayers want to see some tax relief, but I hope that most people also want to see hanging on to maintaining and improving program for kids. And so this additional money allows you to do both to some degree. And so, I mean, that's just because you have this additional revenue. And I shared with the committee, I did a survey of districts that had merged in the late 90s and wrote an article about it. And I surveyed board members and superintendents and I forgot who else, but just as some qualitative data, you know, what do you think about the merger in a number of ways? What happened to your buildings? What, you know, do you feel that student education opportunities for students increased, decreased, remained about the same? And student performance, what do you think happened as a result of the merger? And again, there's a lot of things that affect that. And overwhelmingly, you know, clearly the respondents told me that they felt there were educational opportunities that were added for the children in their district, as well as some sense that maybe that, because of that and other things, it positively impacted how students performed in school. Again, I don't want to draw that causal link because I'm not sure that's there, but that was overwhelmingly their sense, and I'd be more than glad to share that with anybody. But it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, that's really what it is, and you have to take a look at your two individual districts and say, what can we do with this additional money in terms of holding the line on taxes and maybe benefiting students educationally?